I think it is disingenuous to try and separate these two issues. I mean, they are linked. Now, I know we have moved forward with BPRs. I support doing that. We need these efficiencies. Obviously we have some pretty significant budget challenges, but to suggest that they're divorced from one another is not the case. I mean, that's not reality. It's a practical matter. Of course, they're connected. And to the extent that perhaps some of our bargaining units don't want to engage is because they know that they're connected.
BPRs are the city employees' bid to compete against private contractors. They are the roadmap, the strategic operational guide that is laid out before you today, are secrets laid out for private contractors to look at. In the private world, these are called trade secrets. These are being laid out before you. You are not asking private contractors to come and lay out their operational strategy. Why are we doing that for our employees? So therefore, what you're doing today is really dishonest and disingenuous and disrespectful for workers that are putting their best to give you suggestions to improve efficiency in the city. Let me give you examples. The federal law, under Department of Defense Appropriations Act, if a department undergoes successful re-engineering, they should be first given reasonable time to implement that re-engineering. Re-engineering is turning around the system of the department. It is not just head count, not just removing head count as Ms. Anna Danager seemed to refer to. It is not just about head count. It's about changing the way the operations work of the city. So therefore, what really is disingenuous and challenges the integrity of the process is that you're not giving time for these BPRs to actually manifest themselves, and you're not giving them time to realize the cost savings. At the federal level, 5 years are given to a department to realize the cost savings. Then you decide whether you want to compete or not. If you want to decide to compete, like at the county level, then you create a firewall and let the trade secrets remain in-house within the employee bid so that they can compete with the private contractor. That's what happens at the county. So to pretend that BPRs is some isolated thing that happens regardless of what happens in the managed competition world is wrong. So therefore, I would suggest that you don't go forward with these BPRs and that you're not laying out our trade secrets for private contractors. Thank you very much.
An MEGO is not the same as a BPR. You can use a BPR to create an MEGO, but they're not the same. Legally, they are not the same. You cannot take a BPR and say, okay, now let's get an outside bid and compete. It doesn't work that way. And as Ms. Danager just pointed out, not all things that we do a BPR on are going to go to managed competition. So this argument that somehow the BPRs and the managed competition are linked at the hip and that you can't talk about one without the other, it just doesn't hunt.
My name is Damian Tryon. I'm a business rep for AFSCME Local 127. Our concern is the release of what is essentially the employee's bid. So is there a link between BPR and managed competition? Yes, there is. The current city position is flawed. Is there confidential information related to BPRs? Absolutely. In fact, this committee dealt with that very same issue, and I pulled from a March 26 Budget and Finance Committee meeting at which this was discussed. Mr. Sain said that if a function has been targeted for competition, the mayor feels strongly that the BPR results that could compromise an employee bid should not be disclosed in their entirety prior to the competition being completed. Mr. Faulkner, but there is one issue that I want to bring up because I found myself agreeing with Donald Cohen as well. You wanted that brought on the record, so we brought it back for you. To have that proprietary information, and I think that Mr. Sainz was getting to this as well, not being released because we want our employee groups to have the ability to effectively go out and compete and not having everything they worked for be public information or public knowledge that's not fair, that's not a competition.
I understand they're two different things, but I mean, as a practical matter, they seem connected, and I mean, they just are. I mean, you're talking about, the efficiencies our employees are going to have to make, and I'd rather just sort of speak to the motion, which I think fails to acknowledge what I believe to be the case, which is that these managed competition and BPR are connected. I mean, I understand they're different things. I understand the time frames were different, but it's devoid of reality if you want to suggest that one doesn't implicate the other. It just does. And I think that we have to have some clarity on managed competition before moving forward with the BPRs. I love efficiency as much as the next guy, and I'm as concerned as anybody about the budget challenges that we face here at the city. But to move forward with this knowing or choosing to ignore the connection, I think is not reflective of what we're really dealing with here. And so I don't believe I can support the motion. I think that we need to see some completion on the managed competition. I want to acknowledge the employees who provided the suggestions on how to save the city money. Once again, our employees step up to help us try and solve the problems that we have around here, and they should be honored and acknowledged for that. And I think one way in doing that is to get some clarity on managed competition before moving forward. I'd move that the committee forward the BPR to the full council with the direction to our council president that the item not be docketed until the managed competition guide is completed. And that'd be my motion.
The overriding issue of concern for me individually, and I couldn't speak for anybody else, is this issue of separating the BPRs from managed competition and the importance of allowing the BPRs to work long enough to see how effective they are before we go out and say, okay, now we're going to outsource. And while I recognize that need to get the BPRs going so they can prove themselves, I want to make sure there's that integrity in the process to protect the current city workers who are trying to create a system and have their ideas protected.